Advertisements criticizing the U.S. policy on H1B visas have cropped up in San Francisco, which is home to the Silicon Valley. The attack ads criticize the present policy on H1B visas, saying that the U.S. government must take steps to ensure that companies hire American workers. The attack ads have been put up by Progressive for Immigration Reform. It claims to be a non-profit that works on educating the public on immigration. A large number of Indian students and engineers work in the Silicon Valley with some of the leading technology companies in the world. The H1B policy has been a matter of concern for the present Trump administration. The Indian talent is among the leading beneficiaries of the H1B visa, and Indian technology companies often use this program to hire Indian talent for their offices in the United States. The Trump administration has been mulling ways to limit the availability of H1B visas. That's the latest that we are getting you. Anti-H1B visas. Advertisements plastered all across San Francisco. For more on this, I'm joined by Ray Locker, who's the National Security Editor of USA Today, who's joining us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Locker, thank you so much for speaking to WION. How do you see this development? The anti-immigration sentiment is at its peak in the U.S., and what do these advertisements tell you?
Well, the anti-immigration sentiment is high in some parts of the country and not in other parts. Traditional, places like what we call the Rust Belt, the upper Midwest, that have had more blue-collar industries. There are issues with immigration there. Less so in California. I mean, the problem has been that it's so expensive to live in Silicon Valley, and there are so many jobs out there that they've had a hard time finding American workers, so they bring them in from India and other places. And the use of the H-1B visas sometimes is abused by some of these companies. In one particular case here, there was a company in Florida that had U.S. workers who were working on tech projects. The company then found a loophole and brought in some H-1B visa holders, had them take the jobs of American workers. Now, that's a rare case. Most of the time, it's people coming in from India to do jobs that we don't have the U.S. workers to fill. Nevertheless, that causes a lot of resentment.
Right. Mr. Locker, do you think these advertisements will have an impact on, the policymakers or the people at large? Because remember, in the recent past also, we've seen how the Trump administration has tightened the H-1B visa norms. Recently, the norms for third-party on-site companies, those rules were tightened too. So do you think this kind of narrative that's being built in the U.S. will have an impact in the longer run?
No, I don't. I mean, I think money is what's going to determine what happens here. These companies in Silicon Valley make tons of money. They have a lot of political influence. And in the end, they need these people to help continue to thrive in what is probably one of the more dominant U.S. industrial sectors, for around the world. This is a traditional American strength. And like what we've seen in industries in this country for decades, is that they get big, they do well, they need workers, and these workers often come from other places. And that's basically the story of America. And so while there are some people now who are critical of that, the bottom line is more people will come because that's where the money is, and these companies have a tremendous amount of influence.
Right. Mr. Locker, one last question is that companies argue that the U.S. doesn't have the right talent. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think, that's misleading. And in some cases, they do have the right talent. But maybe they're not in California. Or maybe, like, you could be a great computer engineer and live in Birmingham, Alabama, and you can't make enough money to go live in Palo Alto, California. It's so prohibitively expensive. And so they find ways to bring in H-1B visa holders, think of creative ways for them to find a place to live and do it that way. And people coming to the United States from India are willing to do that because they have a great quality of life, whereas people from other parts of the country may not want to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Locker, for speaking to World is One News and giving us your perspective on this big story.